My name is Sarah Overton. Again, I am the production manager for The Dream Unfinished, and I am here with Un Lee, The Dream Unfinished co-founder and executive director. In our Yet Unheard segment, we'll hear a piece by Florence Price called To My Little Son and discuss how Black maternal and infant mortality rates, these two things relate together. So Florence Price is a composer a classical composer, had two daughters and one son. And the son died in infancy. Price was heartbroken and composed this piece to my little son in remembrance of him. So a little bit more about this. It's a beautiful song published and set to a poem by Julia Johnson Davis, and it was published initially through classical vocal reprints in 2010 called 5 Art Songs, as well as 44 Art Songs and Spirituals. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about this piece and kind of, Florence Price's relationship to the issue and how she used music to kind of work through some of this unimaginable grief.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think before we dive into the particular art song, we can share a little bit more about Price. She's become, in classical music circles, I would say in the last couple of years, very much a household name. But for folks who may not be aware of who she is, I think we can talk a bit more about her biography. And then also, like we did in our last episode, share just some vocab terms before we get nitty gritty and granular with the piece itself. And Sarah, I would love for you to help fill in the sort of gaps as far as Florence Price's bio. But I would say in summary, she's considered the first Black female composer to have a piece premiered and performed by a major symphony orchestra. That's sort of how her claim to fame has been put down in the books, would you say? What other details would you share as far as like if people needed a summary of who she is and why she's important?
Yeah, Price, she was a pianist and an organist as well as a composer. And composed over 300 works, symphonies and chamber works, really lush lyrical pieces, performed, like you said, by leading orchestras and performers. The Chicago Symphony performed her works, and Marian Anderson performed some of her works. So it's really interesting how she's just kind of remained on the fringes of classical music while also really being at the center of it, especially being, such a prolific composer.
Mm-hmm.
She is just one of many female composers who, often get overlooked. So, she was a classmate of William Grant Still. She was from a family that was musical as well. So just grew up around a lot of music. I think kind of had the typical composer upbringing, the typical composer origin story. I think of Bach, growing up in a very family. And Price really did very much of the same. So it's interesting, those parallels to the composers that we immediately think of when we think of composers, and kind of how this gets overlooked despite the similarities. So I think Florence Price is very exciting. I love, like I said, just the lush richness of her music, and I think To My Little Son is really no exception.
Yeah, no, of course. And there's actually a really great WQXR musical biography that features Price by Terrence McKnight, which we can drop into the links afterwards. I think this is apocryphal a bit, although I think it is actually mentioned in the QXR piece. But, as you're just saying about her upbringing and how she really grew up in a house of culture. So I believe her parents were actually, pretty well off. It was in a town in Arkansas, I believe, and her father was a dentist, and at the time he was a Black dentist, of course, but he apparently his practice was well reputed enough where he even had some white patients, which I guess is some indication as far as like how they were sort of positioned in the community. And they would have these salon style evenings where, important speakers and politicians who were kind of coming through the area would be hosted by them to do these, these, I guess, like almost sort of salons essentially where they were, sharing on some different sort of topic with the Black intelligentsia of the community. And I think most notably, it was something like like a very young Florence Price playing piano for Frederick Douglass, or like something.
I didn't know that. That's so exciting. It reminds me a lot of, like Schubertiads and also kind of like the salons that Margaret Bonds used to hold.
Exactly.
So it's very interesting to see those parallels kind of come and have that interplay.
Yeah. And for folks who don't know, so Bonds is also a pretty pivotal, I would say, Black female composer who actually, I'm not sure, Sarah, if you knew of her relationship with Florence Price, but Bonds was, I believe, a little bit younger than Price. And at one point, Price had written like her piano concerto. And I believe Bonds was actually the musician who premiered it when it was performed. And they were also, I think this was when Price had gotten divorced. And, so especially in that time in the US, being a single mother, particularly a single Black mother, I think was enormously challenging. And I think she like moved in with Bonds, and like there's some story of Margaret Bonds actually like engraving the orchestra parts for Florence Price ahead of one of these really big symphonic premieres. So they were actually quite close. And it's interesting when you think of these different figures in history and how they actually had links and sort of ties, and that you can connect the dots between them. So yeah, I mean, I think there's, as Florence Price has become much more popular in the last couple of years by certainly classical music organizations and symphony orchestras. I think even that sort of trending is worth a separate episode that we could have at some point. But it's as much sort of radio play as she's getting. Not a lot of people know this detail as far as this child that she had who passed away in infancy. So as you were saying, she had this son, and I'm going to go ahead and, or actually, I keep getting ahead of myself. First, we should talk about the terms that we're going to be sort of sharing back and forth as we're talking about this piece. So the first is diatonic, and actually, should I do this? Maybe I'll do this. Okay. Thank goodness it's a plastic reed, so I don't have to get it wet. Yes. So a diatonic scale, or diatonic notes, I should say, is when you have some kind of, as I think for non-musicians, like do, re, mi, fa, so, like you have that scale. But then when you say non-diatonic, then if everyone's thinking of their prefixes, you're finding some sort of note or some sort of chord or something that doesn't fit into that scale. So like that kind of makes you wince or cringe or something, right? Because it's not what is sort of expected. So she uses some non-diatonic harmony in this piece. And she uses it to do something called text painting. Text painting, I was looking up like the official definitions for this, but Sarah, if you can fill this in more, if you think that there's a better way to flesh it out. But in musical terms, text painting is often when there's some sort of piece with text, with lyrics, and there's some kind of musical element that's being used to illustrate that. Like I think probably the best known example that I can think of is like Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, when there's like all of the little sorts of cues that are supposed to sound like a shepherd's call or like bird song or things like that. I mean, what are some other examples of text painting that you can think of, Sarah, if any?
Yeah, I think the Witches' Sabbath from Hector Berlioz's, I think that's probably a good example of more programmatic music, really, than text painting. But I know with Price and just kind of setting this music to poetry, it's more about how she draws out just kind of the words and dreams and makes different musical statements based on, kind of what's going on within the poem. So she might make a different musical statement on one line, make a harmonic shift in a different place, like you said, introduce new accidentals. By the way, love the clarinet demonstration. Very exciting. And add an arpeggio or a chord in a different key or something, an on chord tone.
Right.
non-diatonic note. So yeah, that's how I think of text painting.
Sarah, that was so graceful of you. I just realized that my Beethoven example is not text painting because there's no text. And you so gently steered me away from that. This is a live show, everyone. Well, no, and what are some other examples of actual text painting? I guess so Schubert is certainly known for it, right? Like there's Gretchen at the Spinning Wheel, which is a really, it's a piece that really sorts of draws you into the story, and the way that that in that particular piece, like the piano has these like running like dun, 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 like and it makes you sort of feel as if you're with her as she's ramping up at the spinning wheel. And then I would say that there are probably, I live under a rock, so I don't know enough sort of contemporary artists, but like text painting is not something that's unique to classical music. Like there are certainly more living popular artists that employ this, where basically it's just using the music to draw attention towards and really illustrate something that's happening in the lyrics. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to go ahead and first share the actual text that Price is painting. So this is the original poem by this poet, Julia Johnson Davis. And one thing that folks should know too in classical music is that often when a composer does a setting of text of a poem like this, they will often take liberties a little bit, as far as sometimes repeating words, repeating lines, sometimes omitting lines, just so that it sort of fits into the music a little bit more closely. In Price's example for this particular art song, she actually pretty much preserves the poem as is. The one thing that she does do is this third line, "and eager, dream of what my son will be." She repeats this a second time. But other than that, it is actually exactly as the poem is written. And I was not able to find the exact history with all of this, but from my understanding, her son passed away, and then she came across this poem and then decided to create this musical composition. And as you can read from the text, this is actually a really beautiful poem in that it's very symmetrical. There's this first section where this mother is gazing at her infant son and seeing trying to imagine the man that he's going to become, dreaming of who her son will become as 20 years pass. And then she's then imagining when he is this man who has fully grown, then is she going to go backwards and try to imagine back to the face of the infant that she's gazing on with initially. And Price, not only does she match this symmetry in terms of the music, but you'll hear with these non-diatonic, with these sort of surprising chords that she introduces, how specifically she does a lot of this text painting around the word dream and around the word wistful. So we have this great, and again, similar to the David Baker piece that we shared last week, there's not very many recordings of this. On YouTube, as far as we could find, I think there are 4 YouTube videos of this. And this is actually a very familiar face for TDU audiences. So Terrence McKnight is the accompanist in this particular video. And for those who don't know, Terrence has been the host of our live events since our founding in 2015. So we're going to hear a little bit. It's a short piece, as you can see, only a minute and a half. We'll hear just a little bit of it because if you want to hear the full thing, you should go to WQXR's website. But let's hear that first half where she's imagining of that man that her son will become.
I sometimes see shadowing of a man to be, and eager dreams of what my son shall be, dreams of what my son shall be.
So we'll just hear a taste of it because, again, you should go to QXR's website instead of watching it from our live stream. But Sarah, I'm curious your thoughts.
Oh my goodness! Actually, that's the first time that I've heard Terrence
Hmm.
play piano. So that was a little treat for me, and a wonderful job by Aaron Flannery as well. I think that just kind of these very pianistic flourishes, really indicative of her background as a pianist herself, and just kind of the way that she utilized some of these emotions and captured a lot of what I could only imagine is just some of the horrific, just kind of madness and grief that you go through after losing a child in that way.
Yeah.
I think that the combination of those two things, just kind of the flourishes and the depth of the piano, and the way that Aaron Flannery's voice sort of conveyed some of this grief was just beautiful, just really,
Yeah.
really lush, a lot of textures there.
Yeah. And was as we were saying earlier, as far as the text painting, so when you hear that pianistic flourish and it kind of takes you into a different key or a different harmony, at least very briefly, and that's dwelling on that word dream. And then not only does it happen musically, but then it happens in terms of the harmony, but then that was the one instance where she chose to take some liberties with the text and then repeat it. And I think, as exactly as you're saying, like how much more poignant and frankly heartbreaking it is, where, in the poem, it's dream of what my son will be. And it's supposed to be from the vantage of a mother who's eagerly awaiting to watch her son grow up. But here it's dream of what my son, in her instance, who her son did not have the opportunity to be. And so really just, uh, I mean, I think this is one of those sorts of powerful things as far as being an artist, that for those who have the wherewithal, that they're able to process tragedies and have it come through in terms of something that then can be out into the world and hopefully touching other people and moving other people.
Absolutely, absolutely agree. It's really this. She put together this very moving form, heartbreaking, like you said, of musical storytelling. The music has its own language to tell what she's going through, along with the text, and the two combined are just poignant and powerful. Really,
Yeah.
really, really incredible.
Yeah. So we'll definitely also drop the link to that QXR video so that folks can enjoy the full piece and hopefully revisit it again and again. And, as we really hope that this music touches people. We hope that it leaves you inspired to learn more about, how you too can become involved in these sorts of issues, and how we can collectively be working on really correcting those current statistics that exist in terms of these mortality rates. So, I think really that music sort of says it all for what we needed to be saying, right? So I think, unless Sarah, you have anything else, I think we're going to leave it here.
No, I think that's it. And thank you for a wonderful discussion of Florence Price and her life and her music. Again, we're going to drop all of those useful Instrument for Change links on our page and everywhere that we can, just to really remind us of how we can use these things, use music as an instrument for change, and be useful to these resources, and use them for the people that we love, and keep them close. So thanks again for tuning in. We look forward to speaking with you all again. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, please feel free to comment on our YouTube page. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button.